Das ist ein alter Film. Hello, welcome to this next session called A New Value Chain for Fashion. This session is organized by Re-FREAM. Re-FREAM is one of the START's lighthouse projects. And the aim of Re-FREAM is to rethink fashion in a research and artist collaboration. To start with, I give you a few numbers. Re-FREAM, we organized 2 calls the last 3 years. In these 2 calls, we selected altogether 20 artists. In the first call 10 and in the second call 10 artists. We are 12 research partners in the project from 6 countries and 20 scientists co-creating together with the 20 artists. And the duo of artist and researcher, they co-create for 9 months and each artist received 55,000 euros for this co-creation process. And we work in 3 hubs, which are located in Berlin, in Valencia, and in Linz, with specializations with regards to technology. And the research partners are the Creative Region, the Verit Berlin, the ITEX, ARCA, Care Applications, EMPA, Fraunhofer, Haratec, IED Madrid, Profactor, Stratasys, and the Kunstuniversity Linz with the Department Fashion and Technology. And last year we already saw the final projects from the first call and you could meet some artists. And today I have the big pleasure to introduce you to, in fact, 11, because we have duos working as teams. So we have 11 artists here with us and 2 external experts for this discussion round. If we speak about sustainability and a new value chain for fashion, we have to know that in fashion we still work really traditional. So our value chain is still linear, and we can explain it with 3 words. It's make, take, and dispose. We make the garments, we sell them or take them, and after very short usage, it's thrown away. So we all know the problem of the fashion industry. We really need a change, and I think with this project Re-FREAM, we can really contribute to this change, what is important. So in the future, for the fashion industry, we really have to produce less, and the less we produce, we have to produce in a very sustainable way. And there are 2 aspects which are really important for this change. On the one hand, we have to look closer at the materials. We need more sustainable materials, but we also need new processes. We still have work with very traditional processes. So in the first half an hour, we want to focus more on the material, and in the second half, we focus more on processes. And so for this first half, I would like to introduce our panelists. So I want to start with the external expert. It's Karin Fleck from the Vienna Textile Haven. Hi. Maybe you can introduce yourself briefly. Sorry.
My name is Karin Fleck, and I'm the founder of the Vienna Textile Lab. We use microbial colors to color textiles, and we think this is a more sustainable way to introduce biotechnology into fashion. My background is I'm a chemist, and I come more from the dark side, from the oil industry and the energy industry.
Oh, micro is not working.
I'm disconnected. It's okay. So, and so this is how I started the business. In 2017, we started the Vienna Textile Lab. And it's a startup based in Vienna, of course.
Super. Thank you. Welcome, Karin. Thanks for joining us. Then I want to start with the first Re-FREAM artist from the second call. It's Loreto Binvignat Streeter. I say it right, your name?
Yes, correct.
Maybe you can also introduce yourself.
Yes, I am a fashion designer. I have my own brand, Anima by Loreto. And I have been working with sustainable and innovative dyes for some years now. I was working at IED Barcelona, also teaching there for some years. I traveled to Vietnam. I was living there where I developed my collection, and I was working there with some Hmong women in the mountains of Vietnam, where I started doing the natural dyeing processes for my brand, and that led to doing more natural dyeing processes within Europe. And then I met Karin and started this more innovative dyeing with microorganisms also, along with her. And now in Re-FREAM, I have been working in ITEX with the lab, and we have been producing our own bacteria to do some direct dyeing and some plant dyeing. And also Karin provided some extract to do dyeing in more of an industrial way.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
For this first round, I would like to introduce Sophia Cucumber and Eugenia Morpurgo. They join us online. Hello, Eugenia and Sophia. Can you hear us? In fact, I don't look at you because I see you here, but I look at the camera that you see. Hello. Maybe you can also introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sophia Cucumber. I'm a footwear designer. I've been researching shoes in general and the process and technologies used to make them. And now it's been very much about materials also. Yes. Eugenia, do you want to?
Hi, I'm Eugenia Morpurgo. I'm a designer based in Venice, in Italy. And in the past years, I've been working, researching the relationship between material production and sustainable agriculture. And I joined Sophia for this project.
Hey, thank you. And also we have Anke in this panel, Anke Loh. Maybe you can also introduce yourself.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, so my fashion background is in traditional collection making. I worked in the industry for a while. And then I think in 2005, I started to work on wearable technology. So that is my focus within Re-FREAM. Thank you.
And we have Alexander Bello for the first half an hour. Maybe you can also introduce yourself.
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Alex, and I'm a garment maker and tailor trained between New York and London, working with tailors and pattern cutters there. And then my focus here is on natural dyeing, which I've been developing over the past three or 4 years, and been working in Hub Valencia, developing that and introducing it into bespoke tailoring.
Okay, thank you, Alex. In fact, my first question would be for you, Karen. So if we think of materials in fashion design, so we think of a knitted or a woven textile. This was our materials for many years, decades. But today, chemistry becomes more and more important. So you are a chemist. So what is the material for you? What aspects are important for you? And why is chemistry today important for fashion design?
Yeah, it's not only chemistry, it's also material science, microbiology, and so on. But when I look at the material, I don't know still, even so with the Vienna Textile Lab, what woven means or what knitted and what types of there. I look at it like at the molecules. Is it keratin based, is it a cellulose, is it polyester, is it nylon, and this excites me. And then the second thing I'm thinking of, okay, what does the nylon, polyester, wool or silk, for instance, react with? So for instance, when it comes to colors, how can we marry them up so that they stay on each other? It's not a given, and to work on this relationship between the textile and, for instance, the color. So this is how I look at it, and I'm not very... It took us a while to understand how fashion works, yeah? And then we still ask, yeah, but what is it? And then sometimes like our counterparts don't even know what materials they send us. So there's a still ongoing discussion about this. Yeah.
And Loretto, your project is also about bacteria dyeing. So you also work in that direction, but you are a very experienced fashion designer. So how does it come that you now look for dyeing processes and for very contemporary dyeing processes? Because in the past we were like printing, but not the bacteria dyeing. And what does this mean for your fashion, that you also take care of dyeing processes and that you look at a much broader section of design?
As I mentioned before, I've been dyeing for about, I would say, like 5 years with plant dyes. I was in Vietnam working with indigo with a Hmong friend of mine in the mountains of Vietnam, so I already had this contact. I love color. I love the application of color. I'm also an illustrator. So for me, it was like, which ways are more natural ways for your skin? No, also less polluting ways of applying color. Also, for me, it's very important to maintain these traditional techniques, right? So that they are not lost. And from that starting point, I got to working with bacteria dyes. I saw Karen giving a talk at Wear It Berlin, and I was really amazed because it was like, oh wow, this is an innovative, this is the future of natural dyes, right? And I approached her and we presented the Worth project and we did it together. So, and for me, it's really important to kind of push this because as Karen well knows, and I think all of us are aware, the textile dye industry is incredibly polluting. It's about 20% of the waterways, right, is created by the textile dye industry. And I feel that it's unnecessary that we are polluting our planet in this way just for clothing, right? I think that we really need to restructure our priorities, right? Is it clothing or is it our lives? Is it our future, right? And for me, I think it's really important to push this, right? It's really important to say, okay, we are designers, we need to be creative, right? There is a quote somewhere, it's like, if it's not sustainable, it's not design. Yes, because you have to think, the design is not just creating something, right? You're solving a problem, and yes, you want to make it aesthetic at the same time, right? But I really think that as designers, we need to embrace sustainability. And yes, maybe the dyes will not be perfect right away, but I embrace the beauty of the natural dyes. I love it. I garment dye a lot. I want my customers ideal to say, okay, I want this dyed with bacteria, or I want this dyed with cochineal, or, you know, and the garment has a life, right? It won't be perfect like your petrochemical dye, because it's coming from oil. It's also not good for your skin, the petrochemicals, right? But then if you're using natural dyes, it's better for your skin. Maybe the color won't stay on forever like it was, but okay, everything, you know, like we're not the same as we were when we were babies, right? So why do we expect our products to stay the same. You know, I really think that we need to shift our mindset, the consumer mindset of everything needs to be perfect. It's like, no, everything needs to be sustainable. That's the way that I think it applies to the designers, right? I think it's very important.
And this brings me exactly to the next question, to two online artists, Sophia and Eugenia. You go even, or you have a different approach, but you somehow go a step more forward. You even take care of the planting of your raw material. So for you, it's really important to look at the whole life of a product. So you start even much earlier. So I'm wondering, can this be done by one person doing the design? But you are a duo, so you applied together for the Re-FREAM project. So is it important to work in teams who bring in a much broader knowledge about material? We also see it in the collaboration from Karen and Loreto in the past. So what do you say about this importance of collaboration and teamwork?
If I can take the microphone. Yes, absolutely. So as you mentioned, me and Sophia, it's already a collaboration. We have different background, we come together, we combine our knowledge, but what we think is that talking about sustainability, it's a very complex topic which goes all along the chain, and that needs and require the collaboration of a lot of different disciplines in order to be tackled in a more holistic way. So collaborations with different disciplines are fundamental, because once you start adjusting only one side of the chain, you're always, anyway, everything is interconnected, interrelated. So for example, in our case, as you mentioned, yes, we look at how the condition and the context in which the plants that we're using are growing, which led us to collaborate with agronomists. And if we would in the future really apply this, we would collaborate with farmers as well. And as much as we need the collaboration with people that allow us to develop materials, but then we come also as designers, kind of creating a connection between all these different kind of disciplines, and trying to have an holistic solution as much as possible in the process.
And what does it mean for the design of the product? Because you are more on the design side, Sophia. If you take care really of the whole process, like from planting to harvesting to developing the material, how does this change the design approach from you?
I think that it's something that I've done in the work before anyway, together with Eugenia and on my own, that what I do, it always depends on the resources that are actually available in a specific place. So it's the resources that are available as much as the technologies and the processes that are available. And I think what changes now in terms of looking at a specific field and designing a shoe by a field and a field by a shoe, is that what also comes into account that you have the seasons and how they change, and you're confronted with the fact that you have a certain resource at one point and a different resource maybe at another. So what we were looking at actually when we were planning the shoes is that we have four different, it's four different versions of the same model, meaning that they can be in different contexts using different materials, but always from the same field. So there is not one definite product that we make, but it takes into account that it's constantly changing, which I think is also a little bit what Loreto mentioned with the colors, the fact that what is perfect and how do you deal with colors, the fact that things transform and things change and they're constantly different. So I think that's something that very much plays into it if you think about it in this way. This idea of what is a product and what is a finished thing, and does it need to be shiny and always the same in order to communicate a product or fashion or whatever you want to call it, I think.
And Karen, they mentioned something interesting, because when they plant, they work with farmers, they collaborate with farmers. So this means a certain location becomes important. So you cannot get the material anywhere, but you do it at a certain place. So do the bacteria change from region to region? Or do you have special bacteria from a certain region?
Yeah, so basically bacteria can be found from everywhere around the world, and some of them prefer hotter regions, some colder. there's also some sort of wildlife protection on them. So there's the famous Nagoya Protocol, which sort of, if you use a bacterium from a certain country, you have to check if you have to pay something maybe. But in general, yes, also even our body, for instance, has our own little bacterial landscape called the microbiome, and that changes as well. So it's an incredible diversity that you have. And also here we had some project here from Julia Moser, who was collecting here on the campus bacteria, so it's very regional to this area. You never know what you find, but also, for instance, you could find something like a microorganism here in Austria, but it actually is very related to one of the deep sea, which is really funny that you find them. Yeah, okay. And you can, and you never know because there is no landscape for this. Yeah. You only can figure out, okay, by the genetic code of the microbe, okay, where does it roughly belong to? Yeah.
Okay. And we have another project in the Re-FREAM. It's not bacteria dyeing, but Alexander, you dye your fabrics with plants. You are doing plant dyeing, and in your project, you say that it's important for you to tell a story with the project. So, can the material with the plant dyeing also tell a story, or how are you seeing the material in your work?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sophia and Eugenia kind of explained it quite well, that when you're talking about materials or even dyes, you're not just talking about a final color. You're really talking about ecosystems, you're talking about plants, you're talking about farmers. There's a whole world behind this kind of end results of this color. So by using plants from the region of Spain, which is what I've been kind of concentrating on, it's really telling the story of, you know, how things grow there and what certain farmers are working on, also about you know, seasons, and it's kind of bringing all these different elements together to create a narrative. So kind of telling the story about a certain region, and I think materials and garments have the power to be able to say that, even though it's very, you know, it's a bit hidden below the surface, is something that perhaps, you know, can be felt. And I've also been kind of trying to integrate scent and aroma into fabrics as well, not only the color of the plants, but also their scent, to create, you know, a different sensory experience. So it's kind of, I think there's a lot of exploration and potential within plants, kind of these hidden stories that we can use within our garments, within fabrics. And I think there's also something interesting to say about integrating it into garments that we wear on a daily basis, right? How our relationship to clothing is changing, you know, the function of a garment from just being wearable to something that maybe lifts you up a bit or makes you have some sort of subconscious that comes into play when you're wearing garments. So I think it's not just about, you know, using plants, and it's very important to respect all their properties as well and do the research, but it has this also, I guess, educational element to it, where you can really learn about, you know, where they come from, and also just from people and farmers of the region as well, to make them perhaps realize things that they didn't realize in the past.
Yeah, thank you. So, Karin, what do you think? What is better, plants or bacteria?
I don't want to get.
We have the expert here. We take advantage.
I don't want to get into this, but I have to say that you know, you're right. I mean, it's beautiful to rediscover plant dyes. I mean, there is no doubt about it. And first of all, we have lost a lot since the Industrial Revolution and the introduction of synthetic dyes. Basically, the development of the natural dyes has completely depleted. And it's 150 years, not much has happening. There are a few exceptions, like there's a dye house in Vienna called Färberei Fritsch. They are specialized on plant-based dyes. But the thing is that they also deserve to be further developed. Yeah, so that's one thing. The other thing is, of course, there's the scalability of this. And I think what you mentioned correctly is that, okay, there's a regionality and there's a limit to upscaling, because we cannot plaster the whole planet with plants to produce colors. but I think the regionality and also to rediscover and even discover new plants or ways to color with natural means, it's something, I think it brings us in touch with our immediate environment. Yeah? And that is, I think, really, really nice. And when biotechnology comes in here, when we talk about scalability, we could take the colors that are produced here in nature and make it more feasible for larger scale. Yeah, and I think they should work hand in hand rather than compete with each other. And there's also like I always say in the Textile Lab that we don't want to compete with natural colors because the market is really small, and I think they need to exist. It's much something else, like it's more tradition, it's about regionality, but also really they deserve to sort of live on and to develop further. Because all the energy and research that has been put into synthetic dyes, like when it comes to light fastness, wash fastness, and so on, that should be also put into plant-based dyes. And I think that is really important. And there we are actually on the same page. Yeah, and there we need to develop it together.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we have another aspect of the material, and this is my question for Ankelo. So you're not working neither with bacteria, neither with plant dyeing, but you work with the interactivity or with the responsiveness. So you integrate last generation sensors into textiles to have an interactivity of the garment and the wearer. So what is material for you? Is material a material, or is it an interface, or how would you describe this?
Yeah, good question. So my background is in fashion. So I've worked with fashion collections for a while for different brands, for my own brand. I worked a lot with costume design for dancers, also for a long time. So I think I always saw fabric, maybe material in general, but definitely fabric as a second skin. And it's also, I think it comes really from a personal experience. So I have very light skin, so everything shows, right? So when I blush, or I'm embarrassed, or I'm happy, it just shows. I can't hide it. It's not possible. So I think it's a very close relationship I have here with material or with fabric. So I approach it as a second skin, and then together with the Fraunhofer IZM in Berlin, we worked on this embroidered touch textiles, which are responsive to touch, and the output is sound. So we decided really early, or I decided actually very early on, that the output will not be visual. There are no lights blinking, there is no visualization of anything. It's really sound, so to work with different senses. And I think this is how I see it. How can we connect, maybe over a distance also, with the help of material, and how can we stay connected, not only through this visual, sometimes I feel it's an overload, but how can we use different senses to stay connected? And I would say that combining fashion, textiles, with technology, in my experience, it's really what makes these textiles last much longer. So they really become this interface where we now use the phone, we use the laptop, right, as an extension of ourselves in a way. Why not combine garments, fashion with these interfaces, so that actually textiles are still our second skin, they feel good. It's embroidery, what we are using, embroidery or knitting, knitted garments. So they feel nice. I have them here, so they feel good. But they are, when I touch them, there is kind of, I can connect via Bluetooth to my friends in New York or in Spain. So that, I think, how I see the possibilities of combining these different arenas.
So we have a kind of extended material for more value, for a more appreciated product too. At this point, we already passed the half an hour. I would like to also take in the other external expert and artists, but the others, please feel free also to ask a question or answer. And I also want to mention that Gisa is in the chat. If there's question you can also ask questions in the chat. So I would like to ask Anastasia Pistofido, Starts Prize winner, to introduce yourself. You're our external expert of this round. I think you were maybe already a bit tired. You were in 3 panels already, so but I think you are a very important input for our discussion as well.
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. I have been following the Re-FREAM projects with a lot of admirations and the whole consortium and the tech providers, very, very inspiring. I would love to see a second round. I am Anastasia Pistofido. I have co-founded the Fab Textiles Lab in 2012 at Fab Lab Barcelona. It's a research lab around textiles and materials combined with digital fabrication. It was the first textile lab within the Fab Lab, and after it has been replicated in other Fab Labs all over the world. And through the practices and the open source material that we have been generating through the years, we have decided, together with my colleague Cecilia Raspanti from WAG Society, to co-found in 2016 distributed peer-to-peer hybrid educational course that is the Fabricademy, Textile and Technology Academy, that combines, it has 4 pillars. It combines sustainability, Industry 4.0, biofabrication, and innovation narratives. And I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you to join our round. Next, I would like to ask Sandra Nielsen. You are a team with Tim van der Loo, so I ask you first to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm a part of the physical team here in Linz. I have a design studio together with Tim, who's on the screen. In Berlin, we are called New Kind of Blue, and we have a project, a textile project called New Blue. So we take all wasted jeans and we use the fibers that can still be repurposed. We bond them and embroider them into a new textile material. So we call it like a reincarnation of jeans, because we take a waste product and recycle it into something alike. That's kind of the DNA of what we're doing.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we continue with Tim, with the introduction.
Hello. Hi, my name is Tim van der Loo. I'm the second part of A New Kind of Blue. I am a material and product designer focusing on waste materials. And yeah, together since this year, Sandra and me are working together within Re-FREAM to work on new finishings and treatments with the New Blue material.
Thank you, Tim. Then we have Malou Beamer. Hi, Malou.
Hi, good evening. So nice to see you all again. Great. Yeah, I'm Malou Beamer. I'm a Dutch designer and researcher, also one of the artists within the Re-FREAM project this year. And I am currently working on an amazing project where we are able to look into adaptive garments, because I'm really fascinated by the fact that everything becomes smarter around us, except the most intimate thing that we can design for ourselves, and that is our clothing. So in that sense, I'm trying to explore different ways to make garments adaptive, not only for practical use, but also for aesthetic value and communication.
Thank you, Malou. And then we also have Silke Hoffmann in the second round. Maybe you can also introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Silke. I'm a clothing designer and a design researcher, and my Re-FREAM project is part of my ongoing PhD thesis that is exploring alternative clothing design processes in the spectrum of female health and breast cancer. And it explores how females who are affected by breast cancer articulate individual bra needs and how these needs can be implemented into design. In general, in my work, I'm concerned with introducing the garment wearer as a critical stakeholder into the garment design and development process.
Thank you, Silke. And then we have Vincenzo, right? I see you
Yes.
only very little. I'm not now. It's not Filippo. It's Vincenzo, right?
Yes.
Because you also work in a duo. Hi.
Yes. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Nice to see you all. So yeah, my name is Vincenzo Reale. I'm an architect and structural engineer by formation. But in the last few years, I've also worked as a designer and a computational designer. And together with Filippo, we have addressed in the past work on digital design of several products. One of the focus that we have had in the past was addressing prostheses or specific devices that generally are thought as only aids or object that needs to fulfill a function, like for example a medical function, but they are not really properly designed. So our idea was to try to move from this conception of a medical object, a medical aim, as something which is just a barrier to something which is actually a design object, something that can be addressed and it can express also the individuality and the creativity of the wearer. So that's sort of our investigation, and we try to move with the Re-FREAM project into garments, into the idea that we can augment a garment with, for example, 3D printing. So making the pieces that we address not only, as I was saying, an expression of an aesthetic functionality, but also fully functional by embedding some intelligence into them. So, for example, understanding how the body works, the temperature of the body works, and trying to translate that into an intelligent object that can fulfill better its purpose.
Okay, thank you to all of you. Second round. I would start the first question to you, Anastasia, Anastasia, you say not English. I'm really fascinated for your project, and I think we can learn a lot from your project. It's this engagement with the community and how you deal with waste. And in fashion, we have a lot of waste, and I think we have a big problem of our linear chain that we take, dispose, so we have a lot of waste. So how do you approach a project, and how could the fashion system or the fashion industry, how could we tackle our problem? Or do you think there are elements from your project, what you say you can give advices to the fashion industry for new ways to renew?
So I think that we are all very open-minded, and we have all understood that the disciplines need to look into other disciplines for inspiration, and promote also collaborations, multidisciplinary collaborations, and I think that this is where innovation lies. We also understand that we are in a digital transformation era where we need to invent new disciplines and things that I think, at least in Fabricademy, we say that the new fashion designer has digital skills, 3D modeling skills, biology skills, wearable technology skills, and this is a combination. I think that this is one part for moving forward, and understand also that we are not, we shouldn't be alone. We should collaborate and seek for the correct partners to move forward. I will say, like a big cliche, it's like alone you can go fast, together we can go further. So it's a cliche, a phrase, but it makes some kind of sense. And I think also when you put the things into a real context and you can pilot and user test them, then the project has a real impact. When you document them, it can become global. And, and of course, some values like being open source, understanding that we don't need to be only startup entrepreneurs, but also social entrepreneurs, and different kind of business models can work in such new contexts.
Yeah, I think this is very important. If you look how the fashion industry works, it's still a lot with processes we apply since 100 years or 200 years. It's still a sewing machine. So I think it now starts. But
you can definitely see this in the students, because the Fabricademy program is, it has participants from all over the world and with different backgrounds and all ages. The fashion students, when we explain to them that they need to document everything on the Wikipedia and that they will work together, they are shocked.
Okay.
Because they have been trained to find the fabric and not show it to anyone, because they will copy them. Anyway, this is just a small example.
Yeah, it's true. It's a part of the business, yeah. But this brings me to the next question to Sandra and Tim, because at first we think you develop a new material. But I think it's not just a material, it's much more, it's a whole process, because normally fashion designers, they do not develop their own material, but you take waste and you already start something, a process, what is important, that you engage in a community to get the waste, to do something out of the waste and to avoid the waste. So how would you say your project, it's more than a material, and what process is it about?
That's correct. Like on the surface, it's all about the material. But when you look behind, there's a lot of processes, there's a lot of hands, there are different steps. So we have like 4 different steps before we get to the end material. And first of all, we need to source our input material, and we cannot just go on Amazon or go down to a shop. We have to source waste, and where do we find that? We have to connect with the people around us, and we do that with our local environment. So there is Textile Haven, which is one of our closest stakeholders, and they take the donated clothes from citizens in Berlin. And what has been the basis for this project is to take the jeans that cannot be given to other people who need them or be sold in shops, but who are the trousers that are destroyed and cannot be repurposed, and then take the fibers from those and give those a new life.
So in fact, you do something what is not there. I mean, we have not a waste, we throw the garments. I think only 2025 there's a rule that we cannot throw textiles away anymore. So maybe then there's something in place, but today it's not. So Anastasia, I always say in English, was this in place for you, or is this also something you started when you gathered the waste to do something new of it? It was also a system what was not in place, I imagine.
So that's I really admire your project. I have been showing it to all of my students, of course, and all of the Re-FREAM projects. It's very interesting because when you want to become efficient, you will find one provider that can have a big amount of waste so that you can produce. It makes sense to turn on the machine. But in our case, we rely and depend on micro manufacturing, distributed manufacturing, very like sparse and little scale within a 1 by 1 kilometer area, which is like a Fab City prototype. And we had problems initially because with the organic waste, when you want to make biomaterials, biofabrics, bioleathers, fruit leathers, however you want to call them, you need to process them quite fast, so that you need to dry them. We had a solar dryer on the roof terrace. Then you need to shred them, you need to trim and sift them to the granulometry you want, and then you use them as a filler for with the biopolymer to make the mix and cast them, or 3D extrude them, or mold them. So there are also different kind of digital fabrication manufacturing processes, or heat press them. And we developed the machinery for that. So we developed the small-scale DIY machines for doing all of these to make a little micro factory, and probably it can be also, when it's documented, replicated in other places of the world. The difference between working with organic waste is that and fabrics is that when you need to recycle the fabrics, you need to separate the different components, which is a tedious work that cannot be automized by artificial intelligence or robots, which is taking out the buttons, zippers, and disassembling the, this is kind of the, some kind of problematic.
Yeah, so I think you challenge, you have a big challenge. Maybe let's have also a look, because the time, we have only 1 hour, but we have so great projects here, so I really want to give everybody a little bit of... let's have a look at other processes, let's say, and I look at Malu and Vincenzo. I'll see you here. You are interested in the relation somehow of, like Vincenzo Filippo, you say that the wearable object and the relation to the body, and for Malu, you are also interested in this relation. But what I think is interesting, Malu, that you are also interested to work closer with the industry, where Filippo and Vincenzo, you are more in a speculative way. So maybe I ask first Malu, so in your process, because in the first, we always think, oh yeah, it's a smart textile, this is not sustainable. But on the other hand, like if you have an approach to have a better connection and a more valuable product, so this also, it's a good product. So where do you position yourself in your project? What does it add to a more sustainable process, your project?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, I think this is a super important point, because often when we talk about sustainability, we mainly zoom into the manufacturing and the producing of the materials themselves, which is of course extremely important. But that is only one part of the value chain. And I think it is really essential to also look throughout the other elements in the value chain. So therefore, for me, it is way more interesting to address the elephant in the room. And that is how we actually treat our garments. So I think in that sense, there is a lot of potential, because back in the day, it were these super valuable items that you actually would give to your children, and it would continue on, and it would have a way longer lifespan. And I truly think that we can't go back to that, but we can add new properties and abilities to our garments to enhance the values that we feel towards them, strengthen that relation, and with that, hopefully, eventually, make the lifespan longer and make our interest also longer in the garments itself. I mean, how amazing would it be if I would be able now to change my shirt from blue to red when I'm speaking, so I'm standing out more, and when I'm listening to the other conversations, I can put myself in the background again. Why is this still not happening? And it is possible. So within that, I think it is essential to look into that element, but also, like we heard before, that it is hard to take the garments apart. That is a huge design error. I think it is essential that we as designers also take responsibility, that we design in a modular way. So it is also easier to take it apart eventually at the end of lifespan, especially if you integrate electronics into garments. It is essential to look at how can we use a modular design approach that can actually trigger new dynamics between the garment and the wearer, but also between the supplier and the wearer. But also, how can we take it apart eventually after the use?
Yeah, I think that's very important what you say. And I think it's so interesting with Vincenzo, because I talked with Filippo, and we had a very interesting conversation, and it was a bit about this speculation and other design methods, because also fashion, it's a very fast business. It's always, we do not really have the time or take the time for speculation or look more far, or And what could we learn, because you're both architects, so what could we learn from methods from architecture or from other methods, and what could this bring back to the fashion system, or to get new processes to look more far in the future?
I mean, I think one thing coming from an architecture background and practice, and it's something that came up also from the conversation previously, is that when you think of a building, you think at a very complex project, very complex object with a lot of different layers. And this is also why it's really difficult to approach, because there are many people involved. It's a process that requires a lot of expertise to be completed. And normally when you think to a cloth, to a garment, you have an idea this is something which is more streamlined, more easy to assemble, and that involves less people. And I mean, maybe in the old times, just one person could do all the process. I mean, this has changed, of course, but I mean, in the mind and the perspective of the people, is still compared to a building, something which has a different amount of complexity, and maybe less people involved into the process. I think it is important that more and more we get into the fashion industry, more layer of people, more layer of experts, and there is a cross-contamination between these different inputs, because, I mean, also, if you want to have a successful building, you need to have a network of people behind that have different expertise. They make it possible, and you need to have knowledge of materials, of structure, of performances. And so I see that this idea that fashion can become a product which is as complex as a building is something which is potentially very interesting. And I mean, similarly, and this, from this perspective, I see that the fashion industry is quite similar from the building industry, from the perspective that digitalization and the digital revolution has arrived to those fields a little bit. Apologies, I was saying that the digitalization arrived a little bit later than other fields, like, for example, automotive or product design, but slowly it made into the industry, and that has been a big change in the last few years. And it's not just about the being faster and quicker, but it's about optimization. It's about being able to use less resources, to have a building which perform better and that are more comfortable for the users. And I see a parallel there with fashion, because, I mean, again, it's not a field where you would think that something digital comes into it by nature, but slowly digitalization, the inclusion of electronics into garments is something which is coming into that, and it's improving the product and potentially can lead, as I said, not only to improve the performances, but an improvement of the sector as a whole. So the ability to being able to use less resources to optimize the garment to make them last longer, for example. So I see both parallel and I mean, maybe ideas that can come from one and contaminate from one field to another.
Yeah, so I think this is really interesting and somehow related. So we need to produce less, and the things we produce, we need a better connection, be more attached to the garments, and be open to other disciplines, and not hide our fabrics under the table that no other students is seeing it, as Anastasia, you said, mentioned the students. And I think we also have one very good examples in the Re-FREAM, among the Re-FREAM artists. So Silke, you are for me the true co-creator in the second call. So in your project, I was really amazed that you orchestrated a whole team, a big team, to arrive at your prototype for the bras for the breast cancer patients. And but you're also a fashion designer with quite an experience as a fashion designer, so you know the traditional process, and now you experienced really this true co-creation process with the whole team and with the user. And so what was your experience, and how could the fashion system invent or work better? What is your experience from this co-creation?
Yeah, hi. I was listening to Vincenzo very very carefully, and I would like to interject here and say that I would argue that a garment is just as complex and has always been as a house, and I would say that in olden times, a house could also be built, and in many places of the world is still built by one person with two hands. So I think this is a very interesting point that you made, Vincenzo, and it's also answering your question maybe a little bit, Christiana, is that actually fashion is a process that has so many different people and institutions involved, and the garment making is highly complex or can be very simple. But in our current system, we are working with many people, and to your question, Christiana, I would say that the fashion design process is always a co-creation process, because wherever people are involved, people are interacting with each other, and the human connection is there. And one of the problems is that we are ignoring it. So we are ignoring a huge part of who we are, how we respond to one another on many different levels, and problems arise out of this ignorance, so to say. And so this co-creation process that I underwent while doing Re-FREAM and also in my PhD studies is, I'm just kind of shedding a light on it and documenting every single thing. So I documented the whole entire process, how we interacted with each other, also on a human level, and how we just, as an ethnographic study, so to say. So it wasn't very different from other processes, just that we were very aware of it. And the findings I'll present at the end of September, I think it's there's not a solution that I can offer at the moment. I think it's just we have to be very aware of how we interact with each other, and to include everybody in the process and every piece of the puzzle in the process, including materials and other entities as well.
And here you bring something very interesting in the discussion, because I think it's interesting that you say that the processes are not so different, but is it a time factor? Is it more something like slow down and take time for the discussion? Is this maybe the change or the different way that you took the time to speak with the person who will wear the garment, and that you maybe take time to research where the yarns come from?
Maybe I'm the wrong person to ask, because that was always my interest. Obviously, in industry, you cannot, depending on where you work, you maybe are not able to be as source the products and the materials you use from the places you would like to source them from. So if you're working for somebody, you have to oblige by their rules. But in terms of working with people and trying to make the social responsibility process, or the process amongst workers and everybody in the chain that you can reach, a process that is a communal process, that was always my goal. And I felt that the best products really do stem from these kind of collaborative approaches, or at least where humans are open and transparent with each other, and all feel that they are in one team. You can achieve more. I like the quote, you can achieve much more if everybody is having the same mission and entering the process with this. So yes, of course, I mean, that is very known. Time is of the essence. Fashion industry is going way too fast. We have to slow down everything. But I think that's not new news, is it?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this is really interesting, what we learned with regards to processes. It's that maybe it's not that different, but maybe to be much more attentive and put the right aspects in the middle, and also look at what is the future resources, and maybe engage much more with the community to see where it comes from, and to look for tools how we could invent systems that we can finally work with that, but also to give more value to the garment and arrive this with interactivity. So I'm afraid we have to close this session. It's already, we are over the time, but I think each topic we could have another session. It was very interesting. I thank you very much to all. I look here now to the screen. Thank you very much for the online participants, and thank you very much for the round. And I thank a lot to the START initiative and the European Commission to finance these projects. I hope it got an impression how glad we are with our projects and the achievements. And I hand over to Mr. Evans. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for another great panel. And I agree with you that it only has limited time. You start a lot of conversations. But I think there's a lot of bars that we can seek in Linz to have much longer of these conversations. I think these are even more important because what you start here needs to develop further. So I want to thank this other Re-FREAM panel, again with the Stars Prize winner part of that, for a very interesting discussion. We touched a lot today. It was a long day. You may not have tuned in for every session, but I was here from 10 this morning until now, not moderating all panels. There were great other moderators. There were great issues at the table, all around the two Stars Prize winning projects of the Territorial Agency and Remix Albario. I want to thank all the speakers today for bringing up all these interesting visions, ideas about how we use data to observe ecological change, how we need to be critical of that, and how we use materials to push back the ecological footprint of humanity, to make two big labels to the morning and the afternoon session. I think it was fantastic that this was supported by the European Commission that is supporting the Stars Prize, which is executed by three partners, that is Beaux-Arts in Brussels, Ars Electronica, where we are now, and the festival is actually just starting. This is the end of the first day. And WAG, we are the third partner in the Stars Prize. So I want to thank, again, all the speakers and the audience for watching. I think there's one last thing I have to say. At 7 o'clock, that's almost now, you can go online where you can meet a number of the Stars Prize artists. Go there, talk to them. It's a very interesting occasion, and it's very inspiring people. Once more, thank you. Have a good night and enjoy the other days here at Ars Electronica, and go see the Stars Prize projects. Thank you.